And welcome back to Music Free Static. I hope you're having a fabulous day. And I've got a question, okay? And this has been bugging me for a little bit, but the question is, how do you know when it's time to make changes? Right? No, I mean, seriously, it was one thing to say, oh, maybe I will have a Coke instead of a Pepsi, or I will have root beer instead of orange juice, or vice versa, right? Some of those are just easy to make based on whims, whatever, who cares? But how do you know when it's time to make, I don't know, more long range changes? Okay. So I'll give you a couple of examples of things, right? So a few months ago, I decided that, you know what? It's time for me to lose weight. Okay. I was 270 pounds. Okay. And it was time to do something about that. And I've changed my diet. And it's weird because it was really a dietary change, not going on a diet, okay, which is important, right? But I had to change my lifestyle. I had to cut out most fatty meats. So I try to avoid beef and pork, and that includes bacon and all that other stuff. That doesn't mean I don't eat them from time to time. I just don't eat them as much. Instead, I tend to eat chicken if I'm going to have meat, or I lean into beans and things like that. Trying to get more vegetables into my diet, right? I have, I've, I've gone from making a breakfast skillet for breakfast, right? There was potatoes and sweet potatoes and beans and eggs and stuff to oatmeal and fruit, strawberries typically, right? Because I needed more whole grains and I needed more fruit. Okay. Right? This is what I'm talking about. This is sort of a lifestyle change that I had to make. Okay. But there are others that I've certainly been thinking about. Other people are thinking about, and just you start to wonder. It's like, so over at Music Free Gaming, where I do all of my gaming streams, mostly Minecraft, right? I realized that the videos I was making, they were basically cut down versions of my streams. They just weren't doing well. Okay, that's not to say any of my content does fabulously, but or even mildly well at all. But I said, okay, I need to. This isn't working. I'm spending a lot of time doing something that's not working. And let's play videos in general just don't work. Okay, they're not great. So I decided to stop doing those types of videos, and I'm just stream it. Okay, I do lots of fun stuff right now. I'm playing in the Create mod. I think the where am I at now? I'm making a chocolate shop right now. Okay, and it's fun. I like I like playing and doing all of that. It just doesn't work well for a video, but it does work pretty well for a stream. Okay. Also, I shifted over to do, when I make videos, I'm making tutorial videos, and they do 10 times better than my others. Now that's still not great, you know, overall from a YouTube perspective, but still better. And in some ways they're, I'm going to say easier to make, but it's definitely different. Now the catch is I don't like making them as much. So, there are changes. But that is a significant change to my content. Okay? I was looking at, I listened to the Imp and Skiz podcast. The podcast hosted by Impulse SV and Skizzleman from the Hermitcraft community. They've been friends for a zillion years, and they got together to do a podcast a couple of years ago. And they just put out in their latest podcast that they're taking a break. They're ending their first quote unquote season of their podcast, taking a few weeks off so they can revamp the podcast a little bit, so they can focus more on bringing in outside voices. Okay, which is awesome, but it's a significant change in their content, and they were talking about it too, which I thought was interesting. Was they had to stop making content so they can make the changes so they can go back to making the content they want to make. And I found that fascinating, really. And that's the type of thing I look at. Like, how do you know when it's time, right? How do you know that it's time that I need to shift from doing one thing to something else? Right? How do you realize that what you're doing isn't quite working and you need to change? Okay. I don't have an answer to this. It's one of those things that when I made the change, decided to stop doing Let's Play videos, I've been making those videos for years, and the views were nothing. Again, not unusual for my channel. My audience is extraordinarily small. But it's like, what do I want to do here? And what's working, and what does my time look like? The time I'm actually using to edit those videos and do that. Is that a good use of my time for the results I'm getting? And I went through it and took a very analytical approach to that change. Okay. On the other hand, when I decided that, all right, it's time for me to start losing weight, that was sort of a just sudden, yeah, okay, let's start doing this. Right. And it was weird. Right. So I'm at work and I checked my email, and I got an email from my health insurance provider. Okay. Now, we could talk about the pros and cons of having health insurance provided by your employer directly. No, we can't. That gets too political. Suffice to say, I get my health insurance through my employer, and they sent me an email, said, hey, are you pre-diabetic? It's like, well, probably not, based off of the blood sugar test I had, but I am significantly overweight because for my height, 270 pounds is not a healthy weight. Okay. Heck, even after losing 30 pounds, I'm still not at a healthy weight. I've got a long way to go. But but as I was looking at that and saw the email, and said, you know what? Sure, let's go ahead and just jump into this thing. And what it was a program run through an app called Lark, which it does, I'm going to call it AI-based coaching. It's not. It's I don't think there's any intelligence to it. The responses are all pretty if A then B. Okay. But what it did do, what it does do is I log the food I've eaten, and it sort of highlights areas where I could do better. You know, for example, I can go through a day and look back at it and say, you know, I did not eat enough whole grains, or I didn't get enough vegetables, or I didn't get enough fruit, or something along those lines. Now, fruit's a problem for me because I am fructose intolerant, so I have to be careful on how much fruit I eat. Otherwise, I start feeling sick. But beyond that, you know, I could take a look and say, all right, I definitely need to make changes to my diet. And that's what I was getting into with the weight loss. When I started the weight loss, I'm not really exercising more. I am eating a little bit less because portion control is a thing, right? I don't need to eat an entire pizza, just some of it, okay? Now, despite all the jokes that any pizza is a personal pizza if you try hard and believe in yourself, I really needed to cut back, okay? So, and that doesn't mean 2 slices, I'll just cut it in half and look, 2 slices, yay! No, it's not how that works, right? But just by changing my diet, just by changing what I'm eating, I'm losing weight. And my wife got in on this too, and it's the same thing. She changed what she's eating, and we cut out snacking, okay? Oh yeah, every once in a while, I mean, we still get treats, right? Now, my wife, she's like this last couple of weeks, she got a can of almond roca, right? Because she loves toffee. But what she's done is, nope, I will have 1 serving in a day. So she has 1 piece after lunch, She has one piece after dinner, and she'll grab one piece at some other point. But that is one serving of Roca, rather than eating, I will have 6 now and 6 later and 6 some other time, right? That doesn't work. And what I do, because I do still like sweet, I do still want some treats, is I'll drink 0 sugar soda. Okay. Now, this happens to be a generic Big K ginger ale, but I like it because, one, I'm not drinking calories, and 2, it's easy for me to not OD on a soda, okay? Because I can finish a can and be done, okay? Now, I would much prefer bottles to cans, but cans is how I can get them. So that's fine. And because of that, hey, this is a change that's working. But it was, the impetus to make the change was really sudden. That was just, hey, I saw the email and said, you know what? Yeah, it's time. I really need to stop being fat man, and let's start doing something about this. Okay. But for things like the change in video size, that wasn't a sudden thing. That was a very analytical decision. I went into that and I started looking at all of my data and looking at all of the stuff that goes into making those videos, and how is that working for me? 2 completely different problems, 2 completely different reasons for making the change or starting the changes, right? Another thing I've been looking at, probably won't do at this point, but one of the things I've been looking at is there's a new app out there for doing game capture and streaming and stuff called Meld. And I'm toying with that. I haven't downloaded it yet. I haven't started playing with it yet, but it's as an alternative to OBS. Now, one of the things that's keeping me from switching to it is that, one, I like OBS and it works great. And OBS is open source, and I'm a big fan of open source, especially because it is open source. I know that it will stay free, right? As opposed to some of those things that start off as being free to play, free to download, free to use, and then suddenly features start getting locked behind paywalls. Okay. I'm a little bit afraid that that's going to happen if I were to step into Meld, right? And you saw that with like Streamlabs. Streamlabs was a really great app for a long time for doing alerts and overlays and all that type of thing in for streams, right? The problem is that Streamlabs started moving stuff behind the paywall, and they even put together their own version of OBS. They got sued because they were abusing the name, so they changed their name. But all the stuff that OBS has, they can do. You just have to pay for it. Okay, which sucks. So, I'm afraid to decide to try Meld and decide I like it, only for them to, however many months or a year or 2 down the line, decide that, nope, we're going to start charging for specific features. And, it's not fabulous. Okay. So, these are the types of things that you start looking at the various parts of your life and wonder, is this something that needs to change? Right? And sometimes it's a question of, is it time for me to change jobs? Is it time for us to take our relationship to the next level, right? Those types of questions are big freaking deals, right? Do I buy a house? Do I continue to rent, right? These are questions that have long-ranging answers, long-ranging effects. But sometimes, I like what I'm doing, but something just doesn't quite jive anymore. The vibes aren't there, right? And I'm not a huge advocate of making decisions based off of vibes, but I think there is an important component to that. Okay, years ago, I watched a it was a organizer on Netflix. Marie Kondo, I think her name was. She was this little Japanese woman, I think, who came in and helped people organize. And more often than not, the problem was you've just got too much stuff and you need to start cleaning out your space. Okay. Well, her big question on doing that is you go through your stuff and you look at it and say, does this bring me joy? And if not, it goes. Okay. Now that can only go so far. All right. I do not look at a mop or a broom and think this brings me joy, but I need to have a mop and a broom in my house. Right. Okay. Right. There's a case for going a little too far with that. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to take a look at aspects of your life and think, is this working for me? Or am I just doing it because I'm doing it? Right? And again, I don't have a solid answer for everything. Right? Now, there are lots of ways you can decide, okay, is this a change I'm going to make? Right? Talk to loved ones. Right? I've heard people recommend having a board of advisors, right? Something like, because it came about from like corporate parlance, where you have a right, you'd have a board of trustees, or you'd have a company would have a board, right? And you've got a chairman or whatever, but they don't have direct control of a company, but they guide a company by advising the CEO or sometimes replacing the CEO and that type of thing. Okay. Now, I don't suggest having a board of advisors that thinks that maybe the problem with you is you and we need to just not have you as part of no, that's just nonsense. But definitely having a group of people that you trust who can give you solid advice. Okay. And sometimes the advice isn't go this way or go that way. Sometimes the advice is, what do you really think about this, that, or the other? Okay. What do you think about your job? Why do you want to leave it? And what else is out there? Okay. And sometimes helping you to at least organize your thoughts or organize your vibes sometimes, because sometimes you look at the numbers and it's like, yeah, these are all the numbers say I should stay here or stay there or something like that. But if you're not happy, for example, in your current job, we'll stay with that example. Even if the pay is better, unless you are so desperate that you're spending every dollar that you get in every month, maybe you don't. Taking a pay cut, there might be a problem. But if you could afford a pay cut to go someplace where you're happier, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, that might even be the right thing. But you have to be able to deal with the consequences of that choice. And that's the thing. Consequences happen from every choice you make. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but every choice has consequences, and the consequence is not the word consequence is not bad. Okay. Right. I know that if I eat that whole pizza, I am going to love it. I'm going to love every bite of it because pizza is amazing. I am going to feel bad in an hour, and I am probably going to gain weight, and that's not going to feel good either. So, right. But you look at some of those types of things, it's like, yeah, okay, maybe I should make a change. Or they can help you see that, no, I don't like this part of my job, but it's only a small part of my job. And maybe there's something I can do to adjust. Okay. And maybe that might be, you have to make other changes, right? So for example, maybe part of the job that you don't like is that you have to commute, or that you have a long commute. Okay. Not great. It's like, okay, I have to drive an hour to work, And then I work, and then I have to drive an hour home. And by the time I'm home, I am just too tired, and there isn't time to do anything else. Okay. That's a reasonable complaint. It's like, but I otherwise like the job. It's okay. Can you start looking at, does it make sense to maybe move closer to where you work? That may or may not be possible, but is that an option? Is it possible to do a work from home or a hybrid thing where you only go into the office 3 days a week and you work from home and the other 2, right? Start looking at things that might solve that problem and solve that specific problem, right? Because sometimes it's easy to wrap up one thing you don't like with an entire whole. It's like, you know what? I need to solve this little portion of it and not totally blow away all of this other good stuff, right? And that sometimes takes an outside person and outside of you, okay? Maybe you speak to a husband or a wife or significant other, a parent sometimes, or do you have friends? I've heard of friends. I know what friends are. Sometimes, you can talk to them, right? These are the things that, you can really, that can really help. And sometimes it may be possible to do a trial run of whatever it is you want to change. So, 2 or 3, 4 years ago, something like that, I decided I was going to stop using Twitter. Okay. Now, this was before the Muskining. All right. So it wasn't anything specific with Musk or anything he was doing. I just realized that Twitter at that point was a hellscape. Now, it wasn't helpful. It was a very negative space. Now, some of that was on me. I followed a bunch of people when I got into Twitter, it was because of politics. I was becoming more and more politically active, and Twitter was the place to be to get all of the hot takes before they were actually hot takes, but just to get other viewpoints on what was going on. Okay. And not just from various blog authors, but that was definitely part of it, or to listen to other independent journalists and things like that. Sometimes it was just other people who had good insight into things or had different insight into things. And it was great. Those early days of Twitter were amazing. But as time went on, there was a lot of negativity that sprang up on Twitter. And I saw that from all over the place. And I realized that, yeah, Twitter sucks. Twitter is not great for my mental health. Okay. Now, I put out a podcast last week that was everything it's the mistake that every social media network is making. Okay. And I think this is part of why I was not happy with Twitter. It's why I have not gone back to X. I do dabble a little bit in Nostr and Blue Sky just to dip my toes in, just to keep an eye on what's not necessarily what's happening in the space, or what's happening on those platforms, just what are they doing, right? And the mistake that they're all making, as I talked about last week, was I have to see everything everybody says, right? And that was part of the issue I ran with the negativity on Twitter. Was I'd see somebody like Will Wheaton, okay? Now, I strongly disagree with Will Wheaton on many things, mostly political, okay? Turns out his politics are far left progressive, and I'm a classical liberal or libertarian, if you want to put it that way. Okay. But his posts were very negative. And I didn't want to see that. I wanted to follow Will Wheaton because I liked some of his thoughts on geekdom and sometimes on tech things and stuff like that. But I didn't want to hear all of his rambling garbage about politics. But I don't have a choice, right? If I was following Wil Wheaton on Twitter, I had to see all of it. So eventually I stopped. Well, my Twitter list is just so full of crap that I couldn't. It's just a mess. So I just decided to stop. But that's one of those things that when I cut off Twitter, I'm just, for a couple of weeks, I'm not getting on Twitter. Okay? I'm done. I'm going to need to take a break from this. And I realized that, you know what? I'm in a much better place without Twitter. So I just didn't go back. And that was great. And it was one of those things that, hey, I did a trial run. Now, sometimes you have to be sure that the trial is long enough. It's like just not logging on for a day. Is that long enough to really help you understand? Do you need a full week? Do you just need 3 days? Do you need a month? Right? And this is up to you, right? And your needs, I suppose. Can you try those types of things, right? And this is one of those things, this is why I detest diets, okay? Like, I am not going on a grapefruit diet, right? Because you're going to hate life. Yes, you might lose a lot of weight, but at the end, you are just going to be hating life, okay? I mean, you might really like grapefruit, but if that's all you're eating for weeks at a time, no, you're going to hate life, okay? And you're going to go back and you're going to, I know at least in my case, you just swing back hard. And now you're back to all the junk food all the time, right? But making some of those smaller changes, like I decided to stop eating cereal, right? Because I'm a breakfast cereal kid, okay? I grew up, now mostly when I was growing up with my dad's, or with my dad, because that's where I lived, which is with my dad, I ate Kix, okay? Lightly sweetened corn puff type cereal, and it was great and boring, and that's just what I had for breakfast. At my mom's, when I'd go over there, she had all the things, right? Now, it was usually the malto meal or store brand variants, but we had we had the Lucky Charms and we had the Fruit Loops and all of those types of things, right? And those were delicious and amazing as well. I loved it when things like Cinnamon Toast Crunch or Frosted Mini Wheats or whatever their cheap knockoff variants were available, right? Loved it. Or Pop-Tarts. Man, Pop-Tarts are amazing, right? Loved them. And when I became an adult and was buying my own cereal, I bought delicious sugary cereals. And they were delicious and amazing. But they were also not good for me. So, and I threw all of that out. Now, let me finish the story. I'll get back to this. So I threw all of that out and started making a breakfast skillet. I'd make a big breakfast skillet. I'd package it up into serving sizes and I'd freeze those. So every morning I'd just pull a container out of the freezer, heat that up. And it was great because one, it was portion control. And two, it was a lot healthier than the cereal. Now, when I started, I wasn't doing beans. I was doing sausage. Okay. Or later chorizo, which is just a Mexican sausage, but still I do that. And then later I leaned in hard on the beans and cut the meat out. Okay. But what I found is that after doing that for a while, I was feeling a lot better. Now, I think part of what the problem is I didn't know it at the time, that I am fructose intolerant, and a lot of those cereals are made with high fructose corn syrup, which means I was eating a lot of fructose, and that was making me feel like garbage, because that's how my body works, right? I wouldn't have known that unless I tried something different. Okay, and so that's where I'm at. Now, all of that's great. The last part of this is like, how do you know what changes can wait or just not happen? How do you look at something and say, you know what? I could make this change, but I'm good. Right? That's one of those things that I think is sometimes just as hard as deciding to actually make a change. Right? Sometimes it's like, you know what? I'm okay. I'm okay not making this change. And, you know, sometimes it's looking at a job and realizing, okay, I don't like this part of it. But you know what? For the most part, I do like my job. So, an example, I was, at my current job, I was hired to, I'm a systems administrator, okay? I was hired to manage servers. But I was hired to manage servers running Windows, okay? Now, I'm not a huge fan of Windows in general, and Windows Server in particular, especially back in the early 2000s. It worked, it was fine, but Windows did not, I think Windows has some problems, or at least at the time had some issues as a server OS, okay? It's gotten a lot better. I still think it has some technical issues. I think it's still I think it's too heavy. I think it uses too many resources for Windows in particular. Not just the apps that run on it, but for Windows. It's heavy in disk space, heavy in RAM usage. CPU usage is a little bit higher, but that's really less of a concern. But all of that said, that's what I was hired to do. Well, I liked my job. I liked where I worked. I liked my coworkers. I liked the environment. I liked all of it. I just was not thrilled constantly running Windows. Now, I also ran some Linux servers because part of my responsibilities was the campus file server, and I realized that I could provide a better service by moving it off of a Windows server and onto a Linux server. Okay, and that worked great. Honestly, there were some real benefits to making that move. Couple of very small drawbacks, but the benefits far outweighed the drawbacks. Okay, and so I was actually doing a little bit of both, Windows and Linux. Well, when the opportunity came, I was talking to my boss, said, you know what, I would really like to get out of being a Windows admin. Well, when we had another sysadmin leave, the decision was made not to hire another Linux admin to replace the person who left, but to hire a Windows admin, and I've moved over and got completely out of the Windows space. Right, it was great. I was able to stay where I was at and work with my boss to make a change that worked for me. Okay, and I'm kind of feeling the same way right now at work too, because I don't like mucking about with hardware, but I have to right now as part of my job. Well, my new boss, hardware is his jam. So there is a possibility as we move forward that he's going to start taking over some of the physical stuff that I don't like. Right? This is going to be awesome if this is the way things go. On the other hand, if it doesn't, yeah, okay, I can keep doing it. But looking at some of the stuff and realize, you know what? I don't need to change jobs. Maybe what I need to do is change my focus. And sometimes that's the change you're making is an organizational change, like how you organize, not I'm leaving this department or leaving this company or whatever. Okay. And that's fine. Sometimes the change you need to make is a small one. Or sometimes it's like, you know what? I'm good. Right? As the song says, know when to hold them and know when to fold them, right? And know when to walk away and know when to run. Right? That's the hard part in life in general, right? And I wish I had an easy answer to say, oh, if you just do this, you'll know. No, it's not that easy. You know, and even as someone who believes in revelation, right? And I can pray and I can ask my Father in heaven, hey, help me on this. I fully believe that, but I also know that God will often tell me, you need to figure this out. This is part of your growth, and I need to be able to do this myself. Okay. That answer comes to me fairly often. Okay. Sometimes it's, maybe you need to look at it this way and not that way. Okay. That happens. Again, the board of advisors said, Revelation works great. A big believer in it, but also friends, family, and other things, right? Sometimes it's just a change of perspective that helps you decide that, yep, it's time for a change. Okay. So again, I wish I had some good answers that just cut and dry. Look at it this way and you'll be good. I don't. I hope that through this rambling podcast, it'll give you some thoughts, some ideas of, hey, yeah, maybe I do need to look at things differently, or no, I'm good here, or whatever. As you're thinking about what's happening in your life, do you need to make a change? Do you not? At least thinking about whether you need to or not. And again, I can't tell you, yep, do this or don't. Only you can decide that. But hopefully, I've provided at least some grist for the mill. And until next time, be excellent to each other. And this is Music Free Static signing off.